Okay, so what we're talking about with how journalism and stuff is changing, to me, you leaving ESPN the same week when this KD Draymond thing happened,
Huh.
I thought
That was a coincidence.
No,
was
it's
a coincidence.
Complete coincidence, but weirdly related because you have this situation where these guys just do an interview with each other. They shoot the shit, and they give us the behind the scenes story of what happened with them with the fight on the bench and afterwards.
Right.
And basically, their version of the story is this was all the Warriors' fault, and this was botched by Steve Kerr and Bob Myers. And then over the next 24 hours, people kind of ran with it like, whoa, I didn't realize that's how. And I'm thinking like, we're in a really dangerous time if the principals of stories are now going to give their version of it. And that's just going to become the fact when pretty much too many people have the actual information for what happened over the course of that week with that team, what led to that fight, all of these different kind of tensions that led to Draymond flipping out in the first place in that game.
Right.
And then how hard it was for the team to handle it because, like I think KD was the one who mentioned about, I watched The Last Dance and how they handled Bill Cartwright. Well, in the Warriors version of this, like they almost got into another thing in the locker room after the game, and then they had to like clear out the locker room. So there was no chance to even have a Bill Cartwright thing. But it was just so weird to watch them kind of recreate their version of what was happening. And then nobody challenges it because nobody challenges anything in 2021. The player story is going to win every time. And look, I don't really care. I just think it's a weird time when the principles of stories can now determine what the facts are publicly, if that makes sense. Like we don't have somebody who is objectively trying to discern what actually happened here and talks to a bunch of different people and gets the actual story. If we're just going to trust the version of those two, we're going to be in a bad place long-term with how we cover basketball.
Well, I'd like to hope that someone's working on that story right now.
Me too.
And I'd like to think that's happening. I will say this. I watched it twice. I was riveted.
Me too.
I found it completely riveting because I can't think of another time when I saw two premier athletes sit down like that and regurgitate something so recent. You see it years later, like the famous Magic and Isaiah kiss and make up interview. That was something, you see those.
That was ridiculous.
Well, of course it was. But
Shaq and Penny was even, Shaq and Kobe was even worse. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but we could talk about that in a minute because I think there's some truth to what you saw between those two, but we could talk about that in a minute. But here's what I would say. Draymond is really good at this.
Yes.
He asked great questions. He paused for dramatic effect. He got right to the point. And he was controlled and measured, which, as we know, Draymond's biggest weakness is when he's out of control and never measured, which is what led to this incident in the first place. He was agitated and he's, transparent to a fault. And we can argue it may have cost Golden State another championship based on his actions that got him suspended all the way back in the finals when they're playing LeBron. But I was riveted by his questions, by his demeanor. And the most riveting part was a player who plays for the Golden State Warriors tearing down his own franchise like that. And I'm not sure he even realized by saying what he was saying, how damaging that was to the Warriors, to this guy he plays for, Steve Kerr, who everybody knows they go at it all the time. That's their relationship. It's volatile, but it's worked, at times it hasn't, and they've had to take a step back. But I don't think he understood, or maybe he does, because he's a smart guy. So if he does understand it, what was the purpose of that? I think probably it was because a lot of people blame him for Kevin Durant leaving Golden State. That is such nonsense. That is not why Kevin Durant left Golden State. I don't see how anyone could say that, including Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant was thinking about leaving Golden State in fact, didn't he? Not reported by me, but I believe others reported. I was there that night, by the way. I was in LA. Yeah,
I was as well.
And people reported later having Kevin Durant saying, "This kind of bleep is why I'm out of here." So to even suggest that was the final straw that sent him away, I reject that notion. I reject it.
It was almost like professional wrestling because I agree. I think Draymond is great at this stuff. I
really smart.
I can't wait until he retires.
Smart. I mean, like they're both really smart, introspective guys. Both of them are. Kevin is so intelligent and introspective, I think. I really do. And I loved watching them talk. And I didn't think it was fair to drop it all at Steve Kerr and Bob Myers' lap. I mean, that to me doesn't seem fair at all. Could they have done better? Yes. But could have those two guys done better? Yes. But here's what always happens with those kind of beefs. And you know this from our history, through our history out in the NBA, but also just if you ever played on a team, you would know this. You get mad at your teammate, you lose a big game, you get hot, you say things you don't mean, you're mad, and you're mad for a while sometimes. You could be mad for a whole season even. But over time, you move on, and the other guy moves on. In this case, you literally moved on to another franchise. And then you look back and you say, yeah, we had beef, but we're okay now. And the thing is, that's the brotherhood of teammates. That no coach or GM, it's not fair, but that's just how it is. Like coaches and GMs are part of it, but then there's this whole nother level of teammates. I just think it's different. And I think that's why they can come back and have this conversation and say, yeah, those two guys blew this up. They effed it up because that's just too simplistic for, maybe they're right about this. If you put the two of them in a room and let them hash it out on their own time, they probably could have come to, and they probably should have done that. And for all I know, they did. I don't know. Do you? I don't know. Did the Golden State Warriors try to get them to sit down and talk? I don't know.
So there's a couple issues with it. One is that they did. And that was, I think, left out of the interview. Okay. I think they tried to put a lot of time into getting those two together and taking everyone out to dinner.
But did it happen?
I think it did. And I think
because I don't know that for a fact. But you might. I didn't know that. I mean,
the smoking gun with this whole thing. Kerr was on the '94 Pippen team,
right?
So
right.
he was literally the number one person on the planet to understand the significance of what was happening in the moment, right? So he got it. I think the whole Warriors thing got it. I think the part that I'm with you. I think Draymond is going to be an incredible talent. I thought though his interview was really fun to watch. And Durant is one of the most introspective athletes we've had in any sport in the last 20 years. I think my issue with it, though, it almost felt like pro wrestling to me, where the elephant in the room, never really discussed, was everything that led up to why those guys got into a fight during a Clipper game, which was ignored. And the reason was everyone in that Warriors team, everyone in the organization knew that Durant was leaving after the season.
Right.
They did. He had
I believe that too.
1 5/6 of a foot out the door. Everyone knew he was probably going to New York. They thought it was the Knicks. It turned out to be the Nets.
Right.
But I think they knew even when he signed there that it was probably like Golden State was his best option in 16. The other option was basically Boston or going back to OKC to play with Westbrook again, which he didn't want to do. And he looked at Golden State and he's like, I could go there for 3 years. I'll try to win 3 titles and then I'll go start my team somewhere else. And then when we got to year 3 and those guys had been through a lot of shit together as a team and as a franchise.
It's hard. It's hard to win again.
They felt like Durant was detached. So when it all blew up, that's what Draymond was yelling at him.
Right.
Like, you're fucking out of here anyway. You're a little bitch.
Yeah.
And that's what led to it. It was so raw because those guys were so mad about how he was handling the season. So for them not to talk about that in the interview, it seems crazy to me. That's the number one thing they should have talked about.
Yeah, it's interesting too because, I did a story preseason the first year, Katie was hurt with the Nets. I went down there and DeAndre Jordan's telling me about them all, him and Kyrie and Katie sitting on the yacht, for Team USA, talking about, come on, let's drink to playing together someday. Now, look, a lot of guys do that.
Yes.
Melo and CP and LeBron did it, and it never happened. Although Melo got there.
Kind of, sort of.
But, and I think, so just the fact that was something they really wanted to do is relevant. But the whole Katie thing with the Warriors, I've never understood why people were so upset by that. First of all, I never understood why they were so upset he went there. He was a free agent. He could go anywhere he wanted. He chose a place that he thought he would love with a coach that he thought he would really enjoy. and with a team that thought could win it. It's not a crime to go someplace to want to win a championship. Number one. He gets there. Don't tell me this narrative that we won without KD before, we could do it again. No. You couldn't win without KD during those 2 championships he won with you. I'm sorry. He was the best player you had. And I know Steph Curry is gold there, and he should be. Steph Curry is the face of Golden State, will be, always will be, has earned that. He's one of my favorite people. He's everybody's favorite person. And that was the biggest problem for Kevin Durant. Even though he won championships, he was never going to be Steph Curry. And guess what?
Also not mentioned in that interview. Steph was like not mentioned, I don't think really at all.
Well,
he was the other elephant in the room. But I mean, just like between KD and Dre.
But he wasn't there that night. Remember,
no, but it's the shadow of Steph on that team, right, and KD being the best player in the team, but never getting the credit for being the best player.
Right.
I think was a real thing.
Yeah, I do too. But Steph Curry wasn't in LA that night. He wasn't in that. And so a lot of people have said to me, if he was there that night, maybe he would have, who knows? Again, who knows? What would he have done after the game? If he tried to do something, get everybody together in the moment? Again, I don't know the answer. It's a hypothetical question. But I don't understand why people have so much beef with Kevin Durant over his time with the Warriors. I'm sorry. I don't get that. That guy won them championships and put his body on the line and tore his Achilles for them when he already knew he was leaving. Why do you have beef with him? I don't get that. I'm sorry. I don't. Kevin Durant left the Warriors as a free agent. He had every right to do so. And he held up his end of the bargain with Golden State. I don't get the beef. I don't get that part.
Well, that's how I ended up having him on my HBO show that summer, because I didn't like the LeBron thing. I hated the decision. I hated where it ended up. The Miami thing, I just didn't like it. If it had happened 5 years later, maybe I would have felt a little different, but I just felt like he had better options, and I just didn't like what he did.
Yeah. Well, nobody did. Nobody did, including Pat Riley, by the way.
Yeah, except for Pat Riley.
But no, he didn't like it. He didn't like it either. Do you know that Pat Riley?
Oh, he cleared out cap space for a year.
No. I'm talking about the decision. The way the decision was done.
I got you. Yeah.
Oh no, Pat Riley wanted LeBron James, but I think all that, like that pomp and circumstance, not 1, not 2, not 3. Yeah. They flashed to Pat Riley in the stands, and I remember looking at him and I'm thinking, this can't be what he wants. This can't be who he is. And I don't think it was.
KD's options were a lot more limited that summer than I think people realize. And I actually think he made the right decision, because the other option would have been either go to Boston or go to OKC. And like, why wouldn't you go play with Golden State? You're basically upgrading from Harrison Barnes to KD. But
come on,
man, you and I were both there that night. That was one of the uglier things I'd seen. The ugliest thing I saw on a court was Robert Horry throwing the towel at Danny Ainge. But this is probably from a teammate thing. This started because Draymond didn't pass KD the ball at the end of a breakaway right before the end of regulation. And KD embarrassed him. Like, he walked over and he slapped his hands.
He did. Yeah.
And that's what led Draymond to be like, are you fucking kidding me? You don't even want to be in this team anymore. And that's what, so for them not to talk about it in that way, but going back to what we were talking about with you and the whole journalism era, like, I do feel like we're entering this new era of kind of player-generated content, player-generated narratives versus the objective person who's supposedly the journalist who, in defense of the person who's against this argument, they'll argue, well, sometimes journalists aren't even-handed either. Sometimes people who are on a podcast or a TV show, sometimes they're slanted too, and you're 100% right.
Yeah, they are right.
But I do think there's a place for the old school, hey, what really happened here?
Right.
Hey, I talked to 10 people, and I hope that doesn't go away.
Well, and I haven't seen Steve Kerr comment, has he? I haven't reached out to Steve.
But this is the weirdly brilliant thing about that interview. So they can say whatever they want about Steve Kerr and Bob Myers. What are they going to do? Is Steve Kerr going to come back and call these guys liars?
No. I'm sure not. Can't. Of course not.
So they have to sit there and take it. And I think
it's unfair. It's unfair to them, I think, to put this all in. But I also think I go back to what I said before. One thing that Draymond said, you're all going to fuck this up, right? That's what he said. When he said, when you suspend me, if you just let me and Kay deal with this, that part, that kernel of truth is correct. But the problem is it can't be on their own time, because they have a team to run and 24 hours, 7 media, all watching this, all expecting answers, all expecting a response to what we all saw. And so that's the part that the players don't understand,
Yeah.
But I do go back to players over the years, time passes, they forget, although Larry Bird never forget about Jim Pax ever, but some people do. And that, I think those two, what you saw between the two of them was very authentic. I do. I don't think Draymond and KD were pretending to like each other in that interview. I think they have a respect for one another, and it went off the rails for all the reasons you just discussed. But that doesn't mean as players, they can't get put back on the rails. But to then lay it at the feet of Steve and Bob, and that's just it's unfair.
Well, the fascinating wrinkle coming out of this is, how does this affect a team that I think has a chance to win the title potentially if Clay can come back and the young guys they have on their bench can be a little better than maybe we thought? Because who knows? Like, I look around at the West, and the Lakers are probably the favorite, but I don't know what Westbrook is going to be like for 4 straight playoff rounds. Who knows? It's
right.
Certainly feels like it's open. And to go into a season now where this is going to become the dominant thing they talk about in training camp. Steve, what was your reaction to Draymond and KD's interview? And it just becomes a thing. Not to mention that if he twisted the facts in some way to make those guys look bad, which only he knows how much he twisted it, and you're those guys, like, this is supposed to be the leader of your team. It's just that kind of an unprecedented story for a basketball team that has a chance to win a title. I don't remember anything quite like this.
But I do feel like Draymond is so volatile all the time. I mean, that's one of his greatest strengths and his biggest weakness, right?
Yeah.
That volatility and that. And he's always sort of said what he thought, and it's gotten him in trouble a lot. And he and Steve Kerr, I think they have a relationships where they can go back and forth and demand transparency. And I think I think Steve can handle this. I just do. I think it's not like he feels like we got to get this guy out of here. Now, does Draymond want to leave? I don't know. He didn't say that. I didn't get that impression. I don't know. I think of Jimmy Butler, and like Jimmy Butler used to say stuff like this, right? Jimmy Butler would challenge his own teammates and would cause commotion like this. And it ended up having teams having to ship him out.
But he never won titles with those teams. I think that's the big difference. Yeah, Draymond has 3 rings with these guys.
No, I know. But I mean, I think Steph manages Draymond. Steph and Draymond have a really, really good relationship.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant's irrelevant to the Golden State Warriors now. Whatever he says is irrelevant. He's not part of their team. So then it comes down to Draymond, Steph, and Clay. Can they put this, can they keep this going? Can they make it work? Can they say whatever they have to say about this? What is Steph going to be asked this? I don't know.
Steph will shrug it off. You know what the irony of this is, though? And I don't know if anyone else made this point. The biggest winner of this interview was Kevin Durant, because this is one of the 3 or 4 teams they're going to have to beat next summer, right?
Yeah.
So basically, he's just sitting there as Draymond's putting bullets into this Warriors infrastructure, and he's just kind of like, yeah, whatever, Draymond, go ahead, knock yourself out. Oh yeah, you want me to pile on Steve Kerr and Bob Myers, 2 guys I don't work with anymore? Great, I'm happy to do that. So he's probably looking for competitors. It's Milwaukee, it's Los Angeles, maybe Miami, maybe the Clips if Kawhi can come back in time. But there's not a lot of teams that can challenge them. Golden State was one of the teams, and they're weaker after that interview. They just are.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
From a chemistry-wise, they are.
Maybe. I don't know. I just think that these guys know Draymond a lot better than you and I do, and there's probably they've probably heard a lot of this before. You know what I mean? You don't think he hasn't said this to somebody else besides Kevin Durant on a television in front of the world? I'm sure they've heard this already, and I'm sure they're all like, "All right, there's Draymond again, man. I hate it when he goes off like this. Let's play." Like I don't know. I don't think this. I might be wrong. I don't think this is as big a deal as you, I guess.
So I think it's a big deal with the Warriors.
Well, I'm sure. I mean,
Draymond and Curry are the leaders of this team that now is a pretty weird team. It's got veterans. It's got young guys. Yeah. They're a title contender, but they're also playing for the next 8 to 10 years. And there's just a lot of things happening. Well, and I think they were in a good place, and now it's weird.
Well, I don't know. If I'm Steve Kyers or Bob Murr, if I'm Steve Kerr or Bob Myers, and anyone asked me, I would say, look, that was like 2-3 years ago, man.
Yeah, we don't care.
I'm worried about today. I don't really give a crap what happened all those years ago, who said what, or everybody can have their own truths. That's true of whenever there's an incident or a moment. Like Jim Paxton, I'm sure remembers what happened very differently than I do, or that's the thing about it. If you put 10 people in a room and there's an explosion in the room and someone detonated the bomb, everybody would have a different idea of what went down. That's just how it is. So if I'm Steve or Bob, I'm like, hey, look, man, that was then. Kevin Durant doesn't play for us. I'm not going to speak to that. I'm speaking about Wiseman and all of these young guys. Yeah, like I got other things to talk about, other things to concentrate on. I think I'm just not going to even deal with this. Sorry, man. I got other stuff I got to deal with.